Every day, we see the darker side of the world around us. We witness how people can hurt others in ways that are hard to understand. It's a sad part of life, but it's something we can't ignore. As someone who dives into the world of crime, I'm here to share the most shocking stories and try to understand what drives people to do such things. I'm Michael, and today, I've got another unreal true crime story for you. On a chilly December night in 2016, the peace of a quiet Toronto neighborhood was shattered by the sound of a woman's screams. Screams that suddenly stopped as quickly as they began. Inside the house, three kids were asleep, completely unaware of the terrible events unfolding just a few rooms away. By the next morning, 40-year-old Dr. Elena Frick, a well-loved doctor and mother of three, had disappeared. Her husband, Dr. Mohammed Shamji, claimed she had left the house with a suitcase and another man. But what seemed like a simple explanation was hiding something far darker. What really happened to Alana that night? And how did her perfect life take such a tragic turn? Alana Frick was born in 1977 in Windsor, Canada, to Joseph and Anna Frick. She had an older sister named Caroline. Her parents were originally from Croatia and had moved to Canada in the 1960s to work for General Motors. After Caroline's birth in 1970, the Fricks faced heartbreak, losing two pregnancies and being told by doctors they wouldn't be able to have more children. Against all odds, Ilana was born in 1977, and her parents saw her as nothing short of a miracle. When Elena was young, the family relocated from Windsor to Tecumseh, a small town in southwestern Ontario where she grew up. Known as a bright and curious child, Elena spent much of her free time immersed in books. She attended St. Peter's Elementary School and later Santa Ana High School. In high school, she participated in Croatian folk dance and spent her summers working in nearby cornfields. Elena was also athletic, joining her school's track and field team. During her school years, Elana met a boy named Mathieu Renaud, and the two quickly became inseparable. They shared everything, from meals with each other's families to a deep love for music. In the 1990s, they fulfilled a shared dream of attending a Nirvana concert, their favorite band. Their bond seemed unshakable, and friends and family believed they were destined to marry. However, life took a turn after high school when Ilana began studying medicine at the University of Ottawa, while Mathieu stayed in their hometown. The long-distance relationship proved challenging, and despite their engagement, Elena eventually ended it, focusing entirely on her studies. Elena's drive to succeed stemmed from witnessing her parents' grueling work at the General Motors factory. She often remarked on how exhausting their jobs were and resolved to secure a career that offered financial stability and a better quality of life. Her determination paid off, and she excelled during her time at medical school. In 2003, while working as a resident at the Ottawa Hospital, Ilana was playing pool in the recreation room when she caught the eye of Mohammed Shamji, a neurosurgery resident. Mohammed, the son of renowned thoracic surgeon Dr. Farid Shamji, came from a wealthy and prestigious family in Ottawa. He had attended the country's best schools and was considered a medical prodigy. Mohammed began joining Ilana for games of pool and eventually asked her out. Ilana was captivated by his intelligence, ambition, and elite background. Despite her growing feelings, she sometimes doubted whether she was good enough for him. Their relationship, however, was far from perfect. While Ilana was deeply invested, Muhammad's behavior often left her disappointed. He skipped her medical school graduation under the pretense of being ill, only for her to later discover he had been out with friends. He was also unfaithful, seeing another woman from his university days. Despite these red flags, Muhammad's charm and persistence convinced Elena to stay with him, even after she had tried ending the relationship twice. In April 2004, Elena introduced Muhammad to her parents. Joseph and Anna were unimpressed, finding him distant and disinterested in engaging with them. Joseph advised Elena not to settle for someone like Muhammad, believing she deserved better. One morning, Anna overheard the couple arguing. When she asked what was wrong, Elena, visibly upset, insisted it was nothing more than a sleepless night. Anna left them alone, assuming it was just a harmless disagreement. Not long after, Elena discovered she was pregnant. Muhammad faced a dilemma, as his Muslim parents would be furious about an out-of-wedlock child and his choice to marry outside their faith. Weighing his options, Muhammad decided marriage was the best solution. Together, he and Elena began planning two weddings, one to honor his family's traditions and another for hers. On September 1st, 2004, Elena and Muhammad held a traditional Muslim ceremony in Ottawa. At nearly 5 months pregnant, Elena adhered to the customs, including having her hands adorned with intricate henna designs, which her Christian mother found unsettling. The wedding highlighted the stark contrast between the couple's backgrounds. Elena's guests were primarily hard-working relatives, while Muhammad's were prominent figures in the medical community. Alcohol was officially forbidden at the ceremony, though some guests discreetly drank in the parking lot. While their union seemed like a compromise between their different worlds, the complexities of their relationship hinted at the challenges that lay ahead. Before their second wedding at a Catholic church, Elena and Muhammad were required to attend several counseling sessions. Muhammad, however, refused to participate and asked John Mark, a mutual friend, to attend in his place. When John declined, the sessions were skipped entirely. Despite Muhammad's indifference and lack of effort, the couple proceeded with a small wedding ceremony at St. Francis of Assisi Church in Windsor. Unlike their first wedding, this one was modest, with fewer guests. To hide the lingering henna tattoos on her hands, Elena wore elbow-length white gloves. After the ceremony, the couple rode in a limousine to the Caesars Hotel and Casino, where they spent part of their honeymoon. Shortly after, they purchased a home in Ottawa and moved there. Elena began working as a family doctor at the Ottawa Hospital, while Muhammad continued his residency in neurosurgery. In January 2005, after a challenging pregnancy, Elena gave birth to a baby girl. She was overjoyed by the arrival of her daughter, but Muhammad appeared detached and uninvolved. His focus remained on his career, often retreating to the upstairs study as soon as he returned home, barely interacting with his wife or child. Tensions grew when Muhammad's family visited shortly after the baby's birth. Elena, upstairs breastfeeding, didn't come down to greet them, which enraged Muhammad. Later, he berated her, claiming it was her duty to welcome guests at the door as a sign of respect. Feeling increasingly isolated, Elena confided in her parents, saying she felt as if she were walking on eggshells in her own home. Over time, Muhammad's controlling behavior escalated, and he began having unprovoked fits of anger. While Elena rarely spoke about her struggles, friends and family noticed her growing unhappiness. Muhammad also criticized her appearance, ridiculing her weight gain and belittling her cooking. A month after the baby's birth, tensions reached a breaking point when Muhammad, in a panic, called Elena's parents, claiming she wanted a divorce. Elena quickly took the phone from him, assured her parents that everything was fine, and ended the call. Not long after, while her parents were preparing to attend church one Sunday, they received a missed call from Elena's home. Using their phone's redial feature, they called back, only to overhear a heated argument. Mohammed's furious insults toward Ilana echoed through the line, leaving her parents horrified. In the spring of 2005, Mohammed was accepted into a prestigious PhD program in biomedical engineering at Duke University in North Carolina. Seeing this as an opportunity, Ilana enrolled in Duke's master's program in public policy, and the couple planned to move to the United States that fall. However, just days before the move, an argument turned violent, and Mohammed physically assaulted Ilana. Terrified, she took her daughter and sought refuge at a friend's apartment. Mohammed, unaware of her location, began calling mutual friends until he eventually found her. After 3 days, he promised to stay with his parents if she returned home. Still afraid, Elena agreed, but asked John Mark to stay nearby for protection until her own parents could arrive. Following the incident, Mohammed faced 3 criminal charges, 1 for assaulting Ilana and 2 for issuing threats. These charges jeopardized both his career and his ability to cross the U.S. border to begin his studies at Duke. To salvage his future, Mohammed worked to reconcile with Ilana. A few weeks later, the family baptized their daughter in a church in Windsor. When guests at the reception asked why Mohammed wasn't there, Ilana told some he was working, but privately admitted to her cousin Rob that they'd had another fight. Rob urged her to leave Mohammed, assuring her she could find someone who truly loved her. Ilana, however, insisted they would work things out. On July 27, 2005, the authorities agreed to drop the charges against Mohammed if he signed a peace bond. As part of the agreement, he had to acknowledge that Ilana had reasonable grounds to fear him and accept a 12-month probation. With the charges dismissed just in time, Mohammed was able to begin his PhD at Duke and cross the border without issue. He moved to Durham, North Carolina, to start his program, and Ilana and their daughter joined him a few months later. Friends and family couldn't understand why Ilana returned to Mohammed. She was intelligent, financially independent, and had the unwavering support of her family. While some speculated that she was drawn to the status her relationship with Mohammed provided, others believed she truly loved him and held on to hope that their relationship could improve. In Durham, the couple settled into a routine. They began running marathons together, often waking up before dawn to train. Afterward, Ilana would drop their daughter off at daycare before heading to Duke University with Mohammed. Mohammed excelled in his program, completing his 5-year PhD in just 3.5 years. Despite his professional success, the cracks in their marriage remained, hinting at deeper challenges that could not be resolved by a change in location. Ilana excelled during her studies at Duke University, earning a rare scholarship that covered most of her tuition and being recognized as the best in her class. After her classes, she would pick up Mohammed and their baby before heading home to prepare dinner, a routine she repeated almost daily. In 2007, nearly 2 years later, Ilana became pregnant again and gave birth to the couple's second daughter in November. Friends of the couple noticed an imbalance in their marriage. Ilana was the one who drove Mohammed everywhere he needed to go. When her friend Valentina Nikolova asked her about it, Ilana simply explained that Mohammed disliked driving. But the imbalance extended beyond transportation. Ilana was responsible for nearly everything in their household, from grocery shopping to assembling furniture and even changing light bulbs. Despite her efforts, Ilana often downplayed her own importance, frequently telling friends how brilliant Mohammed was and how insignificant she felt in comparison. To outsiders, Ilana appeared to hold control in the relationship. Yet, she always sought Mohammed's permission for even the smallest decisions, displaying an unusual submissiveness. Meanwhile, Mohammed would call her multiple times whenever she was out, demanding to know where she was and who she was with. In 2009, after completing their studies at Duke, the couple returned to Ottawa, Canada, and moved into a house near the hospital where they both began working. Ilana quickly became a beloved family doctor, admired by her patients, while Mohammed advanced in his neurosurgery specialization, earning an award for the exceptional care he provided. Around this time, the couple became active on social media, portraying themselves as a wealthy, happy family with beautiful children. However, close friends knew that Mohammed controlled Ilana's accounts, dictating which photos she could post and even pressuring her to harass people he didn't like. Mohammed's controlling nature extended beyond social media and into their daily lives. He denied Ilana permission to subscribe to her favorite newspaper and restricted who their daughters could play with, dismissing children from less affluent families. He often insulted Ilana, calling her useless and stupid, and claimed he would have been better off without her. In 2011, Mohammed moved to Calgary for a year to complete a spinal surgery fellowship. Shortly after, Elena discovered he was having an affair. She found emails confirming the relationship and noticed a credit card charge for a hotel stay with his mistress on Mother's Day. When confronted, Mohammed didn't deny the infidelity. Devastated, Ilana considered leaving him, encouraged by friends who believed she deserved better. Yet, she stayed. Ilana yearned for his approval, believed she had invested too much in their life together, and hoped to prove she was worthy of his love. Mohammed promised to end the affair, and shortly after, he secured his dream job as a neurosurgeon at Toronto Western Hospital. The couple relocated to Toronto, purchasing a $1.5 million home in North York. Elena left her job in Ottawa and eventually found a position at the Earl Bales Clinic. However, she admitted to friends that the new job didn't excite her. She had worked hard to gain knowledge and felt her skills were underutilized. Once settled, Mohammed suggested having another child, noting they had an empty room in their home and expressing his desire for a son. Ilana agreed, hoping a new baby would breathe life into their strained marriage. In October 2013, the couple welcomed a baby boy. For nearly 2 years after his birth, their relationship seemed to stabilize. During this time, Ilana grew close to her new boss, Allison Kaufman, who lived across the street from their home. Their daughters thrived in private school, and Mohammed gained a reputation at Toronto Western Hospital for performing miraculous surgeries. In 2015, Ilana left her clinic job to work at Scarborough Hospital's Family Medicine Unit and became a district delegate for the Ontario Medical Association. Though her career was flourishing, Mohammed resented her success, reigniting tensions in their marriage. In March 2016, the family traveled to Vermont, stopping in Ottawa first to leave their youngest son with Mohammed's parents. That evening, Mohammed called Elena's parents, claiming she had severely cut her right palm and was undergoing surgery. Ilana later provided conflicting explanations for her injury, including hitting a glass on the counter, cutting vegetables, and breaking a dish while washing. None of her stories seemed plausible, and it was clear her wound wasn't accidental. In Vermont, tensions escalated further. The couple argued about Mohammed's affair in Calgary, during which he cruelly compared Ilana to his former mistress, claiming the other woman was far superior. The argument turned violent when Mohammed attempted to strangle Ilana. Later, Ilana confided in friends about the incident but chose not to report it, fearing how U.S. authorities might handle a man named Mohammed. A few months later, the couple celebrated their 12th wedding anniversary, which would ultimately be their last. Ilana gave Mohammed a heartfelt card that read, "My dearest Mohammed, I love you with all my heart. 12 years, 3 kids, 4 cities, 2 countries, and a lifetime of memories. I can't wait for the next 50 years. But the truth was far darker than her words suggested. By late 2016, Ilana had started discussing divorce with Mohammed. Panicked, he begged her to reconsider, and though she agreed to think it over, her suspicions grew that he was involved with another woman. When Ilana confided her suspicions to her friends, one jokingly suggested that she should get a lover herself. Surprisingly, Ilana did just that. She met another doctor who was also married with children. He treated her with kindness and made her feel desired again. Ilana later told a friend it was the first time she'd experienced a shred of happiness since marrying Mohammed. Her lover encouraged her to leave Mohammed and imagine a life without him. Emboldened, Ilana consulted a lawyer to initiate divorce proceedings. She revealed something she hadn't told anyone else, that Mohammed had assaulted her violently in October. It was the final straw for Ilana, who decided she needed to leave, not just for herself, but for the safety of her children. By late November, Ilana officially filed for divorce. Mohammed attempted to win her back by gifting her a large box of chocolates, but she remained resolute. On November 24th, she sent an email to a friend apologizing for her recent absence. "I'm in the process of separating from my husband, and things at home are chaotic. I'll try to catch up with you this weekend. I'll be away at a conference." Ilana attended the conference that Friday, where she spoke on panels, networked, and socialized. Mohammed messaged her throughout the weekend, feigning the role of a supportive husband. Upon returning home Sunday night, Ilana told her close friends that she had served Mohammed with divorce papers. Her lawyer had contacted him on Monday, emphasizing Ilana's desire for an amicable and swift resolution and requesting full financial disclosure. Ilana moved into the basement of their home, but Mohammed repeatedly moved her belongings back into the master bedroom. On December 1st, 2016, Ilana's family tried unsuccessfully to reach her throughout the day. Worried, they called Mohammed, who hesitantly claimed that Ilana had left the house the night before with a suitcase and her boyfriend. Ilana's mother, knowing her daughter would never abandon her children, contacted Allison Kaufman, Ilana's former boss and neighbor, asking her to check the house. Allison peered into the garage and saw that Ilana's car was still parked there. She informed Ilana's parents, who immediately called the police and set out on an overnight drive from Windsor to Toronto. When officers arrived at the house, Mohammed repeated his story about Ilana leaving with a suitcase. Following protocol, they searched the residence for any signs of her, but found nothing. Later that day, police discovered a woman's body stuffed inside a suitcase near the Humber River. She was barefoot, dressed in pajamas, and had severe head injuries. The autopsy revealed she had been beaten, sustaining blunt force trauma before being strangled. The body was taken to Elena's parents for identification. While Ilana's mother, Anna, couldn't recognize her daughter due to the swelling and damage to her face, her father, Joseph, tearfully confirmed her identity. "This is my daughter." The investigation quickly pointed to Mohammed Shamji as the sole suspect. He was arrested the next day at a cafe, where undercover officers handcuffed him at his table. Police discovered that Ilana had attempted to call 911 on the night of her murder, but only managed to dial 611 before Mohammed stopped her. It was also revealed that he killed her while their 3 children were in the house. Their eldest daughter later recounted hearing her mother's screams from her room. Fearing an intruder, she crept to her parents' bedroom and saw her father lying face down on the bed. When he noticed her, he ordered her back to her room. The crime shocked Canada, garnering widespread media attention. The seemingly perfect marriage of 2 accomplished doctors had ended in unimaginable tragedy. Elena's funeral was held on December 17, 2016, at St. Dean Francis of Assisi Church in Windsor, the same church where she had been baptized and married the man who would eventually take her life. While awaiting Muhammad's trial, Joseph and Anna Frick moved into their daughter's home to care for their grandchildren, ensuring they could remain in their school during such a difficult time. In May 2019, over 2 years after the crime, Mohammed Shamji pleaded guilty as part of a deal with prosecutors, avoiding a full trial. He was sentenced to life in prison, with no chance of parole for 14 years. The case received extensive media coverage, and millions of Canadians followed the sentencing. Alana's eldest daughter publicly stated that she hated her father for what he had done and doubted she could ever forgive him. Today, Alana's children live with their maternal grandparents in Windsor. They frequently talk about their mother, but refuse to mention their father's name. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. As the sun set in a quiet Florida neighborhood, neighbors were startled by sudden shouts and urgent knocks on their doors. Ashley Benefield appeared on a neighbor's doorstep, holding a gun and looking terrified. She pleaded for help, saying she had no choice but to defend herself. Inside her home, Douglas Benefield lay badly injured as paramedics rushed in, and police began securing the area. How had things come to this point? Was it just the result of built-up tension, or was there something deeper and more troubling in their relationship? Douglas Benefield was born on October 2, 1961, in Palo Alto, California. He was the second child of John and his wife Suzanne, who had 3 children in total: Wesley, Douglas, and David. Suzanne, a teacher, and John, an aerospace engineer, upheld values of discipline and hard work in their home. John's career later took the family to Huntsville, Alabama, a city known for its role in advanced aerospace development. Douglas thrived in this environment, displaying curiosity and enthusiasm. He was especially close to his brother David, and together they often attended church camps organized by their mother, who was actively involved in the religious community. As Douglas entered high school, he joined the wrestling team, which allowed him to channel his dedication and passion. He quickly became one of the school's top wrestlers, inspiring his younger brother David, who would later follow in his footsteps. David often recalled how Douglas supported and encouraged him during his first match, a memory he cherished deeply. Around this time, however, the family faced a tragic loss when John passed away. This hardship led Suzanne to return to her native Texas with her children, seeking support from family as they coped with their grief. After graduating from high school, Douglas pursued a biology degree at a local university. Those close to him remember this period fondly, as he not only excelled academically but also co-founded a fraternity, demonstrating leadership and teamwork. During his college years, Douglas also discovered a passion for art, an interest that led him to create murals and design logos, distinguishing himself in various academic projects. Despite these new interests, he remained dedicated to wrestling, eventually ranking among the top 10 wrestlers in the state. After completing his degree, Douglas enlisted in the Navy, initially serving as a navigator and co-pilot on aircraft carriers. He continued his training at flight school, where he earned the rank of Naval Flight Officer. In the early 1990s, Douglas met someone special, leading to a whirlwind romance and marriage. Unfortunately, the marriage ended in divorce as quickly as it began. Douglas refocused on his career, enrolling in intelligence training and joining the Naval Intelligence Division. After achieving the rank of lieutenant commander, he retired from the Navy, ending a distinguished military career. Seeking a new direction, he moved to Charleston, South Carolina, where he opened a restaurant. His military background also allowed him to work as a consultant for security and communications technology firms, securing government contracts. During this time, he met a single mother of two, and the two married in 1999, creating a blended family. However, despite appearances, their relationship was sometimes tumultuous, with reports of conflict, including physical altercations that they chose not to report. Nevertheless, life went on, and in 2001, they welcomed a daughter, Eva. Shortly after Eva's birth, Douglas underwent a vasectomy. The following years appeared stable as Douglas managed several tech businesses working with both private clients and government projects. Eventually, he became involved in national security initiatives, focusing on strategic policy development. As Douglas's professional obligations increased, he was frequently away from home, which strained his relationship with his wife to the point where they began sleeping in separate rooms. In December 2015, Eva returned home from school one day to find the front door locked and no response from her mother. Worried, she crawled through the bushes to a window. With the help of a neighbor who forced the door open, they discovered her mother's lifeless body. The emergency services were called and her remains were taken to the morgue, where an autopsy later revealed that the woman had passed away from an undiagnosed heart condition. This unexpected loss deeply affected the family, and Douglas found solace in faith. He began attending church regularly and started each day by reading Bible verses, sharing them with his daughter. By 2016, he had established connections in political circles, particularly with prominent donors of the Republican presidential campaign. During a summer fundraiser in Florida, he met Ashley Burns, a striking young woman born in Texas in 1991 to Alicia and Raymond Burns. Ashley had been immersed in ballet from a young age, working with renowned instructors and joining prestigious ballet companies. However, at 23, a leg injury forced her to retire from professional ballet, setting her on a new path. Ashley subsequently began teaching dance classes to children and maintained costumes for student workshops. She also explored modeling, primarily in swimwear and lingerie photography, though her success was limited. On a personal note, Ashley had been through a divorce after a 2-year marriage and remained close to her mother. She was a dedicated Republican, and after attending a political event, met then-presidential candidate Donald Trump. This encounter led her to join his campaign office in Florida, where she met Douglas at a fundraising dinner. Her beauty, paired with her elegance as a former ballerina, immediately caught his attention. Despite their significant age difference, Douglas was 54 and she was 24, they connected effortlessly that evening. Later, Douglas texted her, expressing gratitude for the time they shared. 2 days later, when Douglas flew to Israel for business, he and Ashley maintained a steady flow of text messages, resembling two teenagers in love. As they got to know each other better through these exchanges, they discovered shared interests, from a deep religious faith to similar music tastes. Both also shared a notable enthusiasm for collecting firearms. Upon Douglas's return to the U.S., they had already decided to marry, opting to keep their plans private, even from Douglas's daughter, Eva. On September 6, 2016, they married in a small private ceremony in Charleston, with only a close friend of Douglas's as a witness. Ashley then moved into Douglas's home. Their early days of marriage faced an unexpected complication when Eva's friend, Sydney, moved in due to issues at home. Douglas and Ashley handled this situation with composure, eventually becoming Sydney's legal guardians. Despite her efforts, Ashley struggled to connect with Eva, who was still grieving her mother's death. It didn't help that Eva had been unaware of her father's plans to remarry. Ashley made numerous attempts to bond by sharing activities, like watching ballet videos and working on gardening projects, but she couldn't shake her insecurity and jealousy, sensing that Douglas would always prioritize his daughter over her. In early 2017, the couple decided to pursue a shared dream by launching a ballet company in Charleston. They sought to challenge traditional ballet norms by recruiting dancers from diverse backgrounds, creating an inclusive space for talent. At the same time, Ashley persuaded Douglas to undergo a vasectomy reversal so they could have a child together. This succeeded, and in July of that year, they learned they were expecting. However, the news intensified tensions between Ashley and Eva, especially when Ashley found Eva's diary, revealing the girl's deep resentment toward her. The diary discovery ignited a series of arguments between Douglas and Ashley that grew increasingly frequent and intense. During one confrontation, Douglas punched a wall, later even lashing out at the family pets. In another heated moment, he threw a gun toward Ashley, leaving a hole in the wall. He then raised the weapon to his own head, threatening to end his life, only to discharge it toward the ceiling moments later. Astonishingly, a few days after this explosive incident, they held a party at a hotel to formally announce their marriage to friends. In August, Ashley experienced significant discomfort related to her pregnancy. After discussing it with Douglas, they agreed she would rest at her mother's house in Florida, while he stayed back to organize ballet company logistics. On September 18th, the long-awaited launch of their ballet company, Douglas was busy at the studio supervising the dancers' arrival. Meanwhile, Ashley made the 600-mile journey to Florida. She quietly packed her belongings, left a letter on the table, and departed without a word. In the note, she described Douglas as possessive and controlling. Alluding to the gun incident, she expressed fear for her own life and that of their unborn child. She warned him not to contact her, threatening to involve the police if he tried. After reading her letter, Douglas was filled with regret and began texting Ashley, promising to change. For weeks, he sent apologies, declarations of love, and assurances of a different future. Ashley's responses, however, remained practical, focusing only on company contracts and financial matters. Despite his continued promises, Ashley wasn't open to reconciliation. She eventually contacted the police, informing them of Douglas's anger issues and recounting the incident with the firearm. As a result of the ongoing conflict, Child Protective Services visited Douglas's home and conducted an interview with his daughter, Eva. Following this, Douglas was required to undergo a comprehensive psychological evaluation. However, the results showed no signs of mental health issues, nor was he considered a threat. Ultimately, he was cleared of the accusations. By this point, though, Douglas was grappling with financial issues. as his efforts to save the ballet company were in vain. The initial investment they believed was secure didn't exist. Despite his optimism, he hoped to secure enough funding to avoid exposing the truth. Under mounting pressure, he borrowed tens of thousands of dollars to cover the first payroll. Nonetheless, by late October, half of the dancers were dismissed, and Ashley publicly distanced herself from the organization on social media. Douglas asked her to take down the post to avoid affecting the remaining dancers, but she refused. Shortly afterward, he admitted the financial reality and had no choice but to close the company. Meanwhile, in Florida, Ashley's health was worsening, plagued by intense pain and fatigue. After numerous unsuccessful medical attempts to diagnose her condition, she sent a hair sample to a lab, which revealed dangerously high toxin levels, suggesting potential intentional exposure. She then recalled the tea Douglas prepared for her each morning and began suspecting that he might have been poisoning her, perhaps even contributing to his previous wife's sudden death. Soon after, Douglas, unaware of her suspicions, sent her a package of tea bags. Ashley, however, avoided drinking it, opting to take it to the police for analysis by a specialized team. Tests later showed no traces of toxic substances. 3 weeks before her due date, Ashley checked into a hospital without informing Douglas. From the beginning, she told medical staff that she believed her husband had poisoned her, exposing her unborn baby to heavy metals. She also accused him of domestic violence, claiming he had held her captive and harassed her in Florida. While her claims couldn't be substantiated, the hospital took precautions for her safety and assigned her a new name. After a cesarean section, her daughter was born healthy. Nevertheless, Ashley immediately sought hyperbaric oxygen treatments for the baby, enrolling her newborn in 26 sessions. In late July 2018, Ashley and Douglas came face-to-face for the first time in months at a courthouse in Florida. Douglas sought custody of his daughter, whom he hadn't yet met. Meanwhile, Ashley, alleging domestic violence and attempted poisoning, requested a restraining order against him. After a 2-day hearing, the judge denied Ashley's request and decided on shared custody of their daughter, citing insufficient evidence of poisoning or related illness. Following the court's decision, they were required to attend counseling sessions together for the sake of their child. During Easter weekend in 2019, while having dinner as a family, Ashley and her mother privately questioned Eva. Ashley's suspicions of Douglas hadn't faded, and she wondered aloud if he might have been involved in the death of his second wife. Eva tried to reassure them, insisting her father was a good man. The following year, Douglas noticed Ashley wearing what appeared to be an engagement ring. He secretly installed a tracking device in her car and hired a private investigator, confirming that she was seeing someone new. Ashley, on the other hand, filed a police report accusing Douglas of allegedly abusing their young daughter, prompting him to file for divorce. After an investigation, authorities found no evidence supporting the allegations. Frustrated, Douglas emailed the police claiming Ashley had a split personality. By then, their relationship seemed irreparable. Yet in mid-2020, despite divorce proceedings, Ashley surprised Douglas by reaching out, hinting at reconciliation. They began seeing each other again, and hopeful that things might work out, made plans to move in together. Douglas rented an apartment close to Ashley's mother's home, packed up his belongings, and arranged for a moving truck. On September 27, 2020, when Douglas arrived in Florida, Ashley's mother took their daughter for a walk while the couple settled into their new home. Suddenly, a heated argument erupted, loud enough for a neighbor to hear. Concerned, the neighbor immediately called 911. Moments later, Ashley, carrying a firearm, ran to a neighboring house, knocking on the door and asking for help. The armed neighbor also contacted emergency services. When paramedics arrived, followed closely by police officers, the entire team secured the area. The paramedics noted that Douglas was still breathing, though he had multiple injuries, including wounds to his leg and arm. A bullet had also penetrated his chest cavity, complicating his condition. Despite all efforts to save him, Douglas was pronounced dead at a local hospital an hour later. That night, Ashley claimed she acted in self-defense, offering few details to detectives. Meanwhile, her mother asserted that she and Ashley had endured domestic abuse from Douglas for over 3 years, adding that they had attempted to seek help on multiple occasions but received no support. Ashley's lawyer told a detective that her client had been planning an escape to get away from Douglas once and for all. According to her, Ashley had arranged for a psychologist, 2 attorneys, a disposable phone, a safe location, and a rental car. She intended to execute the plan the next day, fearing Douglas might discover her intentions. Though Ashley wasn't initially arrested, investigators began to uncover inconsistencies in her self-defense claim. For instance, there were no weapons or blunt objects near Douglas, and Ashley showed no visible injuries or bruises. In November 2020, Ashley was formally arrested and charged with second-degree murder. After pleading not guilty and posting bail, she was released a week later. She was allowed visitation with her daughter, but primary custody was granted to her mother. Despite her legal troubles, Ashley continued to give interviews, defending her version of events. As the case garnered national attention, Ashley became widely compared to the protagonist of the 2010 film Black Swan, a psychological thriller set in the ballet world. After many legal twists and delays, Ashley's trial took place in the summer of 2024. According to the prosecution, Ashley had always intended to be a single mother and never planned to grant Douglas visitation rights. For them, her abuse claims were merely part of a strategy to achieve this goal. Ashley and her defense maintained their original story, and during her turn on the stand, she captivated the court and the nation following the trial by recounting, with deep emotion, her account of what happened on that tragic day. Her defense argued that authorities had failed to respond appropriately to her numerous complaints against Douglas, and that she suffered from battered woman syndrome. Among Ashley's supporters in the courtroom were her mother and her 6-year-old daughter, who even spoke to a journalist, stating she was doing what was right for her mother. Despite this, after a late-night deliberation, the jury found Ashley Benefield guilty, not of the murder charge she faced, but of the lesser charge of manslaughter in the death of her husband, Douglas Benefield. The minimum penalty for this charge was 11 years in prison, with a maximum of 30 years. Afterward, Eva praised the verdict in a video posted on social media. Ashley's defense team, however, quickly expressed dissatisfaction with the verdict, announcing their intention to file for a mistrial, citing alleged juror misconduct. Although Ashley's sentencing was initially set for October 22, 2024, the judge announced that he would consider the defense's motion claiming juror bias, possibly due to alleged dishonesty in a juror's responses and the potential use of a cell phone during deliberations. As of the final week of October 2024, our investigation found that the court was still deliberating on the defense's motion. Ashley's fate remained uncertain, as she could face up to 30 years in prison if the judge denies the motion and issues a sentence. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. On a quiet June morning, Kevin Mengel went about his usual workday, completely unaware that someone was watching him closely, waiting for the right moment to make a move. Nearby sat a bottle of iced tea, a favorite drink he assumed would help him get through the day. But what he didn't know was that this tea held a dark secret, and it wasn't just meant to quench his thirst. What started as a quiet day would soon turn into something unimaginable, a story of betrayal, a twisted romance, and the shocking length someone close to Kevin was willing to go to get what they wanted. Morgan Marie Wixson, later known as Morgan Mengel, was born on September 25, 1975 in Pennsylvania, USA. Details about her early years and personal life are scarce. From what little information is available, it's known that Morgan's relationship with her family faced challenges, especially as she grew into adolescence, adopting a rebellious attitude that her parents disapproved of. Still, the Wixsons hoped she would eventually find direction and stability in life. In 1997, fate led Morgan to cross paths with a young man, Kevin Mengel Jr., who was just a year younger than her. Their connection was immediate, and they soon became a couple. Kevin was born on July 2, 1976, in Springfield, Pennsylvania, the oldest of three children of Kevin Mengel Sr. and Kathleen. Known affectionately as Kevin Sr., his father was a respected local businessman, and Kevin grew up in a close-knit family with his siblings, Christopher and Michelle. However, by the time Kevin finished high school in 1995, his parents had amicably divorced, each moving on to new relationships. Kevin Sr. settled in Downingtown with his second wife, and Kathleen remarried Dr. Richard Barton, adopting his last name, and settled in Westchester. The family separation had a deep impact on Kevin, as he valued family above all else. Though he experienced periods of distance from his father, those who knew him described Kevin as ambitious, hard-working, and determined. When he met Morgan, he believed he had found the ideal partner to build the family he'd always dreamed of. Friends recalled that Morgan was initially affectionate and seemed to compliment him well. However, as time passed, Morgan's behavior began to raise concerns, revealing a pattern of deception. One early red flag surfaced when, about a year into their relationship, Morgan attended a family dinner at the Mengels' home with an unexpectedly noticeable belly. When someone asked if she was pregnant, Morgan denied it, claiming she was simply bloated. Yet, just one day later, she gave birth to a baby girl named Mercedes. Even in the hospital, Morgan insisted she hadn't known she was pregnant, despite her family's doubts. Her demeanor lacked the usual excitement of a new mother, which surprised the Mengels, although Kevin was thrilled at becoming a father. Overjoyed, he and Morgan decided to marry soon after their daughter's birth. Following their wedding, Kevin established a landscaping business, with Morgan helping him run it. Their family expanded with two more children, Kevin Jr. and Billy, and Kevin devoted himself to his family, even naming the business with the initials of his children. Although they appeared to be a happy, perfect family, tensions began to surface. Reports suggested that Morgan had been involved with some of Kevin's friends and that he was aware of her infidelities. Heartbroken but unwilling to break up his family, Kevin remained steadfast, hoping to provide a stable home for his children, despite the toll it took on him. In 2009, Morgan left their home on several occasions, staying with her mother but always returning, even as friends described an increasingly turbulent relationship. Kevin's devotion to family extended to reconciling with his father that year, and they grew closer than ever. Even as his marriage became strained, he remained hopeful, valuing unity and stability for his children. By spring 2010, things seemed to be in relative order. That year, a 21-year-old named Steven Chappell, known as Steve, joined Kevin's landscaping business. Kevin quickly trusted and valued Steve as a team member, unaware that his presence would alter Kevin's life forever. On June 20th, Father's Day, the Mengels had planned a family picnic where Kevin was looking forward to reuniting with his father after many years. Yet, as time passed and Kevin didn't appear, his family grew anxious. Kathleen received a message from Morgan explaining they wouldn't be attending due to unforeseen circumstances. This puzzled everyone, knowing how much Kevin had anticipated this reunion. Familiar with the couple's dynamics, his family couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, given Morgan's history of infidelity, financial deceptions, and even arrests for petty theft and bad checks. As worry grew, family members began calling and messaging Kevin, but he didn't respond. Upon piecing together their recent interactions, they realized that no one had seen or heard from him for several days. For Kevin's family, his silence was uncharacteristic and concerning. Close as he was with his mother, he would never go so long without contacting her, leaving them certain that something was very wrong. Concerned family members grew increasingly anxious as Kevin remained unreachable, prompting Kathleen to contact the police and officially report his disappearance. The following Monday, officers visited Kevin in Morgan's apartment, where they encountered Morgan, who seemed calm and unconcerned. She explained to the officers that Kevin had messaged her to say he was fine but needed a break, instructing her to take over the landscaping business temporarily. According to Morgan, Kevin had felt overwhelmed by business pressures and decided to step away for a bit. She showed the officers text messages sent from Kevin's phone, supporting her claim, leading them to conclude that Kevin was merely taking a personal break. Consequently, they decided not to pursue an investigation at that time. However, Kevin's family found this hard to believe. They couldn't imagine him abandoning his children without warning. Determined to reach him, they continued calling and texting, but each time they attempted a call, they received only brief text replies telling them to leave him alone and let Morgan handle the business. The lack of phone conversations, along with the unusually short messages filled with abbreviations, uncharacteristic of Kevin's usual writing style, only heightened their worry. Suspicious, the Mengels alerted the police again, who then initiated a missing persons investigation. Detectives soon discovered that Kevin had allegedly left home on June 15th following an argument with Morgan. Just a week after Kevin's disappearance, the family learned Morgan was seeing another man, Steve Chappell, a young man 13 years her junior who had recently started working in Kevin's landscaping business. When questioned, Morgan explained that Kevin had been fond of Steve, viewing him almost as a brother, and had asked him to help take care of the children in his absence. She even introduced Steve to her children as Uncle Steve. But suspicions only grew, especially as people saw Morgan and Steve acting affectionately in public, holding hands and lounging together at the apartment pool. Additionally, Steve was frequently seen driving Morgan's truck while out with the children, leaving Kevin's friends and family stunned. Police then brought Steve in for questioning. Under pressure, Steve admitted to having an affair with Morgan, stating she had initiated the relationship by showering him with compliments until he fell in love with her. Steve described intimate encounters in Morgan's truck and at the company workshop, but denied that Kevin knew of their affair. During the interview, detectives warned Steve that if anything had happened to Kevin, suspicion would naturally fall on him. Overcome, Steve broke down in tears and refused to answer further questions. Days later, as the investigation progressed, Kathleen received an unexpected request from Morgan to watch the children for a few days, arousing suspicions that Morgan might be planning to flee. On June 24th, Kevin's brother Chris and some friends decided to keep watch outside Morgan's apartment. Early that morning, they saw Steve leaving the apartment with a bag, followed shortly by Morgan, who loaded more bags into a truck before driving off. Notably, the children were not with them. Chris immediately alerted the detectives and began following them. The pair drove to the landscaping business, where one of the detectives was coincidentally present, hoping to uncover any clue to Kevin's whereabouts. When Morgan exited the vehicle, the truck's back was filled with clothing. She walked past the detective in a hurry, but when he tried to speak to her, Steve suddenly sped away in the truck. Confronted, Morgan claimed that Steve might have harmed Kevin, leading the police to take her to the station for further questioning. During the interrogation, Morgan admitted that Steve had expressed his love for her and his willingness to do anything to be with her. When detectives asked if she thought Steve had hurt Kevin, she quickly revealed that Steve had struck Kevin in the back of the head with a shovel. Morgan was then left in the interrogation room while police used phone tracking to try to locate Steve. Though they didn't find him immediately, they uncovered something far more incriminating: an extensive exchange of messages between Steve and Morgan. Realizing these texts might hold clues to Kevin's disappearance, a dedicated team spent hours analyzing the conversations. That same afternoon, they discovered the extent of the chilling plan Morgan and her lover had devised to eliminate Kevin and gain control of the business and children. In one exchange, Morgan had explicitly told Steve that once Kevin was gone, they could take over the company and build a life together as a family. The investigation revealed a premeditated scheme involving poisonous nicotine. Messages showed that on the evening of June 16, 2010, Steve had been in his mother's kitchen, concocting a potent nicotine solution, lethal with just a few drops, after researching its preparation online. Once the poison was ready, Steve added it to Kevin's favorite tea and handed it to Morgan. The next morning, she placed the bottle in Kevin's truck, hoping he would drink it throughout the day. Sure enough, while working, Kevin took a sip to quench his thirst, unaware that Steve was watching him closely. When the tea didn't seem to take effect immediately, and Kevin continued working as usual, the two resorted to their backup plan. Steve texted Morgan, indicating he was ready to act with a shovel in hand, waiting for Kevin to bend down. Around 10:20 a.m., while Kevin was trimming hedges, Steve seized the moment, striking him hard on the head with the shovel. The blow was so forceful that the shovel broke, prompting Steve to grab another and continue the assault until Kevin stopped breathing. Steve messaged Morgan confirming, "It's done," to which she insisted on seeing for herself. Morgan arrived at the workshop, reportedly stepping over her husband's lifeless body, showing no remorse for the man she'd been married to for 13 years. She kissed Steve and took control of the situation, giving him instructions to dispose of the evidence and the body. Together, they wrapped Kevin in a tarp, bound it with rope, and hid his body in an unused garage at the landscaping company. After cleaning up, they left the scene. According to court records, they appeared to take satisfaction in their actions, with Morgan even joking about endorsing the brand of tea they used in their failed poison attempt. 4 days later, Steve transported Kevin's body to a wooded area behind his former high school, where he buried him in a shallow grave he had dug in advance. Meanwhile, Morgan began using Kevin's phone, sending texts to his family, friends, and even herself, attempting to create the illusion that he was still alive and simply taking time away. However, she failed to consider that technology could reveal both phones' locations as the same, a clue that would soon unravel their plan. While still at the police station, Morgan was confronted with the incriminating messages, and she was promptly placed under arrest. By tracking their cell phone locations, authorities found Kevin's burial site shortly afterward. 2 days later, Steve, who had fled to Colorado in Morgan's truck, was apprehended. Although he initially resisted extradition, he eventually agreed to return to Pennsylvania, where he tearfully confessed to everything. On July 18th, a memorial service was held for Kevin, with his family asking for donations to a trust fund for his children instead of flowers. The children were left in the care of Kathleen and her husband, with support from extended family, as they faced the challenge of helping them cope with the tragic loss of their father and the absence of their mother. As the family mourned, they found solace in knowing the perpetrators of Kevin's murder were behind bars and facing justice. During the trial, shocking evidence emerged that revealed Morgan's depravity. From prison, she had sent Steve letters claiming she was pregnant with twins and that he was the father, hoping to manipulate him into taking sole responsibility for the murder. She even sent fake birth certificates, describing the twins in detail, but investigators quickly exposed her lies. Ultimately, Steve cooperated with authorities, becoming the prosecution's key witness at Morgan's trial. He recounted how their affair began, how Morgan persuaded him to participate in the plan to kill Kevin with nicotine poison, and when that failed, to attack Kevin with a shovel. Steve described burying Kevin's body behind his high school and the extensive communication between him and Morgan before, during, and after the murder. Morgan continued to attempt deception, even posting messages on social media to imply Kevin was simply taking time off. However, Steve revealed that she had tried manipulating him from prison by pretending to have given birth to twins, hoping he would take the fall. On February 3, 2012, a twist arose when a judge declared a mistrial due to the testimony of a police sergeant who mentioned an interaction with Morgan's father, implying she was capable of heinous actions. This comment was deemed prejudicial, leading to a new trial. Despite the setback, the Mengele family remained hopeful that justice would prevail for Kevin. The second trial began on February 5, 2013. At her initial hearing, Morgan, now 37, pled guilty to first and third-degree murder, conspiracy, and possession of a deadly instrument. Sentenced to life without parole and an additional 20 years on probation, Morgan expressed remorse through a statement read by her attorney, acknowledging the void she had left in Kevin's family. On February 11th, Steve Chappelle, age 24, pled guilty to third-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, receiving a sentence of 40 to 80 years in Pennsylvania State Prison. In contrast to Morgan, Steve spoke directly, expressing deep regret for his actions and stating he would never forgive himself. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. On the evening of November 2, 2001, Irene Jones and her daughter Isabella went out to celebrate Irene's 56th birthday. They shared what seemed like a lovely meal together before heading home, but by the end of the night, only one of them would survive. After a quick stop for gas, Isabella walked into the house alone. She says she had no idea what was waiting inside. What unfolded would set off years of suspicion, uncover strange secrets, and leave friends and family questioning everything. Megan Jones, later known as Isabella Carolina Camelo Gomez, was born in 1974 in Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. Public information about her early years and personal life is extremely limited, though it is known she was the only child of Irene Jones, a single mother who raised her. No details about her father's identity have surfaced, nor are there records of her schooling or employment history. Isabella lived with Irene into adulthood in a charming suburban home Irene had bought in Sydney. Irene Caroline Jones, born on November 2, 1945, was widely known as a devoted, generous woman and a caring mother. After retiring, she dedicated much of her time to volunteering for various charities. Friends and neighbors described her as sweet and hospitable, often offering her home to those in need. Irene was known to provide not only a loving home, but also financial support to Isabella. Even during brief periods when they lived apart, Irene always welcomed Isabella back. To the outside world, their relationship appeared close-knit and supportive. However, later accounts would reveal a different dynamic. Despite her public shyness and insecurity, Isabella was reportedly disrespectful and sometimes abusive toward her mother behind closed doors. Matters worsened in 1999 when Isabella met a woman named Paula Camelo at their local Mormon church. Over time, Isabella and Paula became close friends, and Paula eventually introduced her husband, Carlos Camelo Gomez, a Colombian native. This introduction would mark the beginning of a chain of events that deeply affected everyone involved. The couple started spending more time with Isabella, and Carlos eventually mentioned his brother Cesar, who was stuck in Colombia due to visa issues. In March 2001, Isabella traveled to Colombia to meet Cesar. Soon after, she claimed they had fallen in love and married him, news that shocked Irene. Despite her objections, Irene learned of the marriage through photos, to which Isabella reassured her it was merely a fake marriage. Following this, Isabella adopted the name Isabella Carolina Camelo Gomez and grew increasingly close to Carlos. Their bond raised suspicions, particularly since Cesar was still unable to join her in Australia. Paula, growing jealous, suspected an affair between Isabella and her husband. It later emerged that Isabella was financially supporting Carlos, sending money to his family in Colombia. Carlos even had a separate room in Irene's house and a private phone to communicate with Isabella in secret. She reportedly bought him a car, yet he continued to pressure her for more, hinting he would leave Paula for her. Tensions between Irene and Isabella escalated as Irene opposed Isabella's financial support of Carlos. This led to intense conflicts, with Isabella allegedly becoming physically aggressive. A friend of Irene later recounted instances where Isabella's anger turned violent, breaking her mother's glasses and, on one occasion, reportedly pinning her down by the neck. Irene confided in this friend, admitting she was frightened but hesitant to involve the police, fearing potential fallout. She also felt threatened by Paula, who reportedly arrived at the house on multiple occasions, threatening to burn it down. In response, Irene installed security lights, though it offered little comfort. Witnesses describe Carlos as aggressive and domineering toward Irene, physically intimidating her and further isolating her within her own home. Irene saw him as a manipulative presence who was not only depleting her finances, but also eroding her sense of safety and control. Carlos's control reached unimaginable levels when he demanded that Irene mortgage her home, transfer its ownership to Isabella, or sell it to provide him with $20,000 to start a construction business. By May 2001, tensions had reached a breaking point. Carlos and Paula had separated, and shortly afterward Carlos moved permanently into Irene's home. Irene felt pressured to vacate her main bedroom so he could share it with her daughter. Then, in October 2001, Carlos claimed he was returning to Colombia, but Irene later found out he was still around and confided in a friend about her concerns. She grew more anxious after learning that her mail was being redirected to an address in Maryland, where Carlos and Isabella had briefly stayed earlier that year. Irene was perplexed by the situation, especially as Isabella, despite receiving money to pay household bills, had not done so, using the funds to pay off her own debts instead. With mounting debts from the car she had bought for Carlos, Isabella even owed Irene a significant amount. As the financial strain intensified, Isabella renewed her push for Irene to sell the house. However, Irene refused, threatening to change her will, which had initially left her assets to Isabella in the event of her passing. Despite the friction, things appeared to settle somewhat between mother and daughter, and no one found it odd when they went out together on November 2, 2001, to celebrate Irene's 56th birthday. Although Irene was still apprehensive, she decided to make the most of this momentary peace, hoping to enjoy a calm evening with her daughter after nearly 2 years of constant tension. Their meal at the restaurant seemed pleasant, and after paying the bill around 7 p.m., the two women left to drive home. Isabella took the wheel, but upon arrival she told Irene that the fuel tank was nearly empty and suggested that Irene go inside while she quickly stopped by the gas station. Irene entered the house alone while Isabella drove to refuel, returning around 8:15 p.m., citing abdominal cramps from her period and wanting a hot shower. After parking the car, Isabella went straight to the bathroom. Following nearly half an hour in the shower, she emerged, wrapped her hair in a towel, applied face cream, and prepared for bed. However, when Isabella opened the bathroom door, she was met with a terrifying sight. Standing in front of her was an intruder, a blond man in a beige long-sleeve shirt, his face covered with a pantyhose mask and wearing white gloves. According to Isabella, terror-stricken, she tried to flee through the bathroom's outdoor exit. However, the intruder reportedly yanked her back violently with a cord or cable around her neck. Isabella claimed she struggled fiercely, but the man struck her and pushed her onto the bed, attempting to undress her. She screamed for help, causing the man to flee. Shaken and terrified, she bolted to the nearest neighbor's house, frantically knocking and crying out for help, saying someone had broken into her home. The neighbors let her in, and Isabella urgently expressed concern for her mother. They advised her against going back, fearing it was unsafe. Isabella then borrowed the neighbor's phone and dialed Australia's emergency number, 000, anxiously informing the operator that an intruder had attacked her and that her mother was still inside. Police and ambulance units arrived shortly after. While paramedics attended to Isabella, officers searched the home, where they made a horrifying discovery. Irene's lifeless body was found face down on the floor, showing signs of strangulation and cuts on her neck. Officers immediately cordoned off the crime scene, calling in homicide detectives and forensic experts. The home appeared disturbed, with items scattered, initially suggesting a burglary gone wrong. However, valuable items were left untouched, and there were no signs of forced entry or missing belongings. Isabella was taken to the hospital to receive treatment for her injuries and to recover from the traumatic incident. During the ambulance ride, a friend of Irene's accompanied her. Isabella repeatedly asked about her mother, insistent on seeing her. Irene's body was transported to the morgue, where a post-mortem examination revealed that she had died from a combination of asphyxiation and sharp force injuries. It was determined that she had been rendered unconscious by strangulation before being attacked with a sharp object on the left side of her neck. The cuts were not immediately fatal, leading the assailant to use 2 ligatures around her neck, leaving a distinctive double mark on her skin. In total, she sustained 22 injuries, with the time of death estimated around 9:30 p.m., with a possible margin of error of 3 hours. The ligatures and sharp object used in the assault were never found. After leaving the hospital, Isabella stayed with one of Irene's cousins and her husband. The couple, deeply fond of Irene, described her as a kind soul, incapable of harming anyone, and were devastated by the brutal nature of her death. The investigation into Irene's death continued, but interviews with neighbors, friends, and family yielded no leads to help authorities identify or arrest a suspect. Frustrated, investigators sought to re-interview Isabella, but Irene's cousin and her husband reported that Isabella was constantly distressed and often cried when remembering her mother. Some sources even claim they had to call an ambulance after Isabella overdosed on sleeping pills prescribed to help her rest. When the police finally spoke with her, they asked if Irene had any enemies or if anyone might wish to harm her. Isabella mentioned only a minor traffic incident she was involved in, but the other driver was quickly ruled out. By this point, investigators began doubting Isabella's account. Although both Isabella and Carlos were seen as suspects, there was no concrete evidence tying them to Irene's murder. At Irene's funeral on November 9th, some attendees allegedly heard Isabella mutter incriminating words, though this information would surface only years later, as witnesses initially believed she was rambling in grief. After the murder, Carlos and 2 of his friends were questioned. One of them, named Sean, stated he was at home, arriving around 5 p.m. and then falling asleep until 8:30 p.m. when Carlos and another friend, Nicholas, joined him. He explained that Carlos sometimes stayed over, sleeping on his couch. Around 1 a.m., Sean woke briefly to find his friends on the sofa. By 3 a.m., the police arrived to interview him, to which he claimed no knowledge of Carlos's connections with Irene or Isabella. Carlos and Nicolas provided statements placing themselves together in various locations until midnight, giving Carlos an alibi near the time of Irene's death. Carlos admitted meeting Irene and Isabella through his ex-wife Paula, claiming they had helped him post-separation. He noted that he once held a key to the Jones house but had since lost it. The investigation seemed to stall until, a year after Irene's death, her daughter sold the house for $300,000. In November 2002, Isabella gave birth to her first child with Carlos. Initially, she denied he was the father, stating he was only a friend and brother-in-law. Later, she admitted the child resulted from a casual encounter, after which she realized her true feelings for Carlos, deciding to divorce Cesar to be with him. Disturbing details about Isabella's relationship with the Camelo family heightened police suspicions. However, without solid evidence, Isabella remained uncharged, and Cesar was never questioned despite his occasional stays in Australia. Over time, the case languished without arrests or a clear answer regarding who was responsible for Irene's death. In January 2003, the case took a new turn when Isabella reported Carlos for assault. Police records reveal that she stated they had known each other for about 4 years and had been in an on-and-off relationship for the last 3. Years passed with no progress until November 2007, when a forensic inquest took place to re-examine evidence with the potential to refer the case to prosecutors if warranted. Though Isabella attended, she offered no new information. However, one witness, Diane McLeod, who had accompanied Isabella in the ambulance, shared new details. Diane recalled that Isabella had initially told detectives she did not see her mother during the attack, but had mentioned seeing Irene in the house to her during the ambulance ride. Diane also reported that Irene had confided in her about her fears regarding Isabella's connection to the Camelo family, particularly Paula's threats. Carlos, in a follow-up interview, stated that he met Isabella at a cyber cafe around 7:30 p.m. on November 2nd before heading to Sean's house between 8 and 8:30 p.m. He then claimed he returned to the cyber cafe before heading back to Sean's and then to a club with Nicola where they stayed until midnight. He denied being near the Jones house that evening, though his statements contained minor inconsistencies. Ultimately, the investigation concluded with insufficient evidence to proceed to trial, leaving the true identity of Irene's killer undetermined. The lead investigator recommended offering a $100,000 reward for information leading to an arrest and suggested the case be transferred to the Homicide and Cold Case Unit for further examination. Between March and September 2013, the deputy state coroner reviewed the case again, yet it remained amid 700 other unsolved cases, limiting resources and attention. No further developments occurred until March 2017, when the Ministry of Police approved the suggested reward. New witnesses came forward, and a forensics team re-examined evidence collected from the initial investigation. Among the items was a yellow blouse Isabella wore the night of the crime, preserved in a forensic lab since 2001. This item had not previously undergone forensic analysis, as the technology available today didn't exist at the time. According to records, the blouse was retrieved from storage by state forensic staff in March 2013, photographed, and then returned to the lab for analysis in April that year, remaining under police custody thereafter. The forensic analysis from July 2017 provided significant insights when microscopic tests and DNA sampling were conducted on the blouse Isabella wore on the night of Irene's death. The tests revealed small brown stains consistent with traces of bodily fluids on the front and back of the blouse, along with several strands of hair. The forensic report concluded that the blouse had been exposed to an area with blood splatter, indicating direct exposure rather than mere contact with the perpetrator or the victim's body. Experts suggested the splatter likely came directly from the victim, Irene. Further tests showed that traces of bodily fluids on the blouse matched Irene's DNA, while seminal fluid found on it matched the genetic profile of Carlos. Unfortunately, by this time, Carlos was unavailable for questioning due to a severe brain injury from a 2013 motorcycle accident, which left him with deep retrograde amnesia, erasing memories of events before the accident. Though investigators hit a dead end with Carlos, the forensic findings and additional witness statements provided grounds to implicate Isabella in a conspiracy to orchestrate her mother's death. Supporting evidence included statements from witnesses at Irene's funeral, where some recalled hearing Isabella whisper that she didn't mean for things to go so far. This admission prompted authorities to wiretap Isabella and Carlos's phone conversations and set up listening devices. Surveillance tapes captured sounds of intimate interactions between Carlos and Isabella at the residence, confirming a long-standing relationship. Combined with Isabella's 2003 assault report, in which she admitted to a 3-year relationship with Carlos, it became clear that her marriage to Cesar was merely a facade, supposedly arranged by Carlos to facilitate Cesar's immigration to Australia in exchange for affection and sexual encounters. Further corroborating evidence came from Irene's experiences living in fear with Isabella and Carlos, with Isabella willing to do anything to please him, blinded by obsessive infatuation. Hospital records from the night of the attack also noted Isabella's intense interest in seeing her mother post-autopsy, which was interpreted as a need to confirm Irene's death. Another damning testimony came from Paula, Carlos's ex-wife, who claimed that Isabella had once asked her if she knew anyone who could get rid of someone. Despite these incriminating pieces, it would take 2 more years for the case to see another breakthrough. In 2019, new testimony surfaced when Sean, a former acquaintance, disclosed that he had seen Carlos and Isabella together days after the crime. He also revealed that Carlos allegedly described how he had slit Irene's throat and promised Nicholas $10,000. Nicholas, meanwhile, said that on the night of the crime, Carlos had left to return a car to his boss's home around 8 p.m., returning between 11 and 11:30 p.m. Later, Carlos reportedly confessed the crime to Nicola after they went to a club around midnight. Due to his brain injury, however, Carlos might never face justice. On the morning of Tuesday, September 24, 2019, detectives arrested Isabella. A detective inspector present at the arrest informed the press that Isabella seemed stunned when officers arrived, and she was taken to the police station, where she awaited a murder charge. Police officials alleged that Isabella had planned her mother's murder and staged a break-in to cover up the crime, her primary motive being the financial gain from selling Irene's home. Following the arrest, Isabella was granted conditional bail but was held in custody pending her arraignment. Her defense argued that she had cooperated with authorities, provided DNA samples when requested, and handed over her passport in 2001 to comply with a travel hold. However, the prosecution denied bail, asserting that despite the circumstantial nature, the case was strong. The prosecution highlighted that the murder was financially motivated, with traces of Irene's blood found on Isabella's blouse from that night. Although the judge deemed the case reasonably strong, he felt it was not overwhelming, ruling that any flight risk from Isabella could be mitigated with strict bail conditions, including a $10,000 bond, twice daily check-ins at the police station, passport surrender, and no contact with witnesses. After remaining in police custody, Isabella's detention hearing proceeded in the New South Wales Supreme Court 3 days later. Nearly 3 years afterward, in May 2022, Isabella, formerly Megan Jones, age 48, was rearrested, and a New South Wales Supreme Court jury found her guilty of murdering Irene Jones on November 2, 2001. Upon hearing the verdict, Isabella expressed disbelief and claimed the jury had made a mistake. Finally, on November 16, 2022, Isabella was sentenced to 20 years in prison, with a minimum of 14 years before eligibility for parole. In delivering the sentence, the judge recounted that Irene had been ambushed in her kitchen while drinking a glass of water and had died from the combined effects of strangulation and stab wounds to her neck. The judge remarked that in her final moments, Irene must have felt confused, terrified, and betrayed, emphasizing that her own daughter had orchestrated and likely carried out her murder, driven by obsessive infatuation and greed. Though the defense argued that Isabella's direct involvement in the fatal attack could not be definitively proven, the court acknowledged her role in a criminal conspiracy with Carlos, who, due to his condition, would likely evade justice. Isabel would be eligible for parole in 2036, at which point she would be 62 years old, with her full term expiring in 2042. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. On a sunny April afternoon, the school bell rang and kids poured out, excited to head home. Among them was 8-year-old Tori Stafford, her bright smile lighting up as she walked toward her older brother, just like any other day. But as she made her way through the crowd, a woman approached her, someone who seemed friendly and safe. After a quick chat, Tori took the woman's hand, trusting her without a second thought, and walked over to a nearby car. In that small, ordinary moment, everything changed. The town of Woodstock, Ontario, was about to be shaken by a mystery that would turn Tori's world upside down. Her family and friends couldn't have imagined what was really happening that day, or the dark truths that would slowly come to light. Victoria Stafford, more commonly known as Tori Stafford, was born on July 15, 2000, in the town of Woodstock, Canada. She was the second child in her family, born to Rodney Stafford and Tara McDonald, who had previously welcomed their first child, a boy named Darren Stafford. Tori's family life was marked by significant difficulties, largely due to the complex and troubled relationship between her parents. This tension led to their separation in 2002. It was reported that both Rodney and Tara struggled with substance abuse, but while Rodney managed to enroll in a detox program, Tara did not follow the same path. Following the separation, Tori and her brother Darren stayed with their mother. Despite the less-than-ideal circumstances of her home life, Tori was a vibrant and affectionate little girl, known for her warm smile, sparkling eyes, and chestnut hair. She enjoyed the simple joys of childhood, like playing with her friends and attending school. She also loved going to the movies and watching performances related to ballet, dance, and acting. Tori's compassion extended to animals, with a particular love for dogs. She frequently begged her mother for a puppy, and although Tara's financial situation was tight, she was actively trying to find a way to bring a dog into their lives that would suit a home with two young children. By the time Tori turned 8, she was attending a public school in her town. On April 8, 2009, Tori set off for school around 7:45 in the morning, as she usually did, accompanied by her brother Darren. They planned to meet after classes to walk home together, a habit they shared regularly. The siblings were deeply bonded, and their strong relationship helped them cope with their challenging family situation. Though Tori was lively and outgoing, Darren was more reserved. She often encouraged him to enjoy typical childhood activities, helping him stave off the sadness that their circumstances occasionally brought. As the school day ended around 3:30 p.m., Darren waited outside the school building for Tori, intending to go home with her. However, his friends asked him to join them briefly, and he agreed, assuming it would only take a few minutes. When he returned to their usual meeting spot, he found that Tori was gone. Thinking she might have decided to go home alone, he headed back, only to discover she wasn't there. Worried, he told Tara, who tried to reassure him, suggesting that Tori was likely with her friends. But Darren remained unsettled. He quickly took his bicycle and began searching the neighborhood, checking with neighbors and searching nearby streets. While Darren was searching, Tara decided to call her mother to ask if Tori was with her, but she wasn't. Growing concerned, Tori's grandmother contacted the police around 6 p.m., reporting her granddaughter's absence. Officers arrived promptly at Tara's home and started asking questions, noting Tara's delayed reaction to alerting the authorities, which they found unusual. Learning of Tara's struggles with substance abuse and her unemployment, investigators placed her high on the list of individuals potentially involved in Tori's disappearance. Meanwhile, the search for Tori intensified. News of her absence quickly reached Rodney, who immediately joined the efforts to locate his daughter. The community rallied, with neighbors and friends helping to distribute posters of Tori across the area. The school even closed temporarily to allow teachers and staff to join the search. Posters featuring Tori's face appeared on almost every corner, and search parties combed through Woodstock, asking anyone they encountered if they had seen her. Despite the widespread effort, no clues emerged as to her whereabouts. Determined to uncover any leads, investigators decided to check the footage from security cameras located around the school. To their surprise, they found clear footage of Tori leaving the school at 3:30 p.m. She was seen talking to a woman and showed no signs of fear or hesitation, suggesting familiarity. The woman took Tori's hand and together they walked toward a vehicle parked nearby. The police immediately released this footage to local media in hopes of identifying the woman, who appeared to have physical similarities to Tara. Rodney, visibly shaken, appeared in interviews on multiple media outlets, showing deep concern for his daughter's safety, a demeanor that sharply contrasted with Tara's stoic response. The public quickly noticed this contrast, with many expressing suspicion toward Tara. In response to mounting criticism, she agreed to an interview, during which she expressed sadness and frustration, stating that people were focusing on baseless rumors instead of the search for Tori. Rodney, despite their differences, supported Tara's statement, emphasizing their shared hope for Tori's safe return. As the footage circulated, the public became more involved in the search, while Tara viewed the clips multiple times, feeling a strange familiarity with the woman. Finally, on April 12, 2009, Tara contacted the police, claiming she had recognized the woman from the footage. According to her, the woman was Terry Lynn McClintock, an 18-year-old who had once been her neighbor. Whether Tara genuinely recognized her or received information from others in her circle remains unclear, but her identification proved to be a significant breakthrough in the case. Terry Lynn McClintock, a troubled young woman with a complex past, had crossed paths with Tara, Tori Stafford's mother, on multiple occasions. According to some accounts, she occasionally procured oxycodone for Tara, and in a few instances the two had brief conversations about raising dogs, with Tara sharing how Tori longed to have one as a pet. Although Tara confirmed that there was no close relationship between her and Terry Lynn, she acknowledged that Terry was aware of Tori's strong desire to have a dog. Terry Lynn's childhood was marred by hardship, shaped by parental neglect and abuse. She was ultimately raised by her adoptive mother, who worked in local nightclubs. These early life challenges deeply affected Terry Lynn, and by adolescence, she exhibited violent behaviors, engaging in various altercations, including an attack on her adoptive mother and some local youths. In 2007, she escalated her criminal behavior by committing an armed robbery, injuring a man who resisted. Following this incident, Terry Lynn was detained at a juvenile center, where she reportedly wrote disturbing letters expressing her desire to inflict pain and suffering on others. Though her psychological issues were noted at the time, she was eventually released back into the community. With this background, law enforcement swiftly brought Terry Lynn in for questioning when they identified her as a suspect in Tori's disappearance. Despite extensive interrogations, Terry Lynn insisted on her innocence. By April 13th, the local police handed over the missing person investigation to the Ontario Provincial Police, officially reclassifying it as a kidnapping case. Determined to uncover the truth, the new investigative team monitored Terry Lynn's calls and visits closely, soon noticing her frequent interactions with Michael Rafferty, a 28-year-old man she claimed as her boyfriend. Michael, however, described their relationship as strictly platonic, though he regularly visited her. Born on December 28, 1980 in Woodstock, Ontario, Michael also came from a troubled family background. By 2009, he exhibited aggressive tendencies and had been accused by at least 13 women of physical violence during intimate encounters, often involving attempts to choke them. Continuing their probe, police decided to question Michael during one of his visits to Terry Lynn, framing their inquiries around her recent activities on the day of Tori's disappearance. Unfortunately, they couldn't gather enough evidence to hold him, so they returned their focus to Terry Lynn, increasing the frequency and intensity of their interrogations. Despite mounting pressure, she remained tight-lipped, leading investigators to a standstill. On April 25, 2009, an international television program aired a special segment on Tori's disappearance, drawing significant public attention. To everyone's surprise, the broadcast struck an emotional chord with Terry Lynn, who, 5 days later on April 30th, broke down and confessed that Tori had died on the same day she was taken. Terry Lynn recounted the grim events, providing chilling details of the crime. She explained that on the morning of April 8th, she and Michael were using substances together when he suggested taking a young girl against her will. He specified that the victim should be a child and goaded Terry Lynn, knowing her vulnerabilities, by challenging her courage and hinting she lacked the nerve. Eager to prove him wrong, Terry Lynn went along with the plan. At around 3:15 p.m., they drove to a school nearby and parked at the back. She got out and waited, watching children as they exited until she spotted Tori. Utilizing the information Tara had shared in their conversations, she approached Tori, introducing herself as a friend of her mother and promising that she had a puppy in her car. Innocent and eager to meet the supposed puppy, Tori trusted her, held her hand, and walked with her to the car, where Michael grabbed Tori and forced her into the vehicle. The pair then drove about 80 miles north, keeping the radio on to monitor for news of Tori's disappearance. Confident they hadn't been detected, they made a couple of stops along the way, first at a gas station and then at a department store. Here, Terry Lynn left Michael with Tori and went inside to buy a hammer, garbage bags, and tape. Afterward, they continued driving to a remote field where Terry Lynn stepped out of the car, knowing what Michael intended to do. According to her account, she turned her back to avoid witnessing the horrors unfolding. However, as Tori's desperate cries echoed from the car, Terry Lynn briefly glanced back and saw the young girl, pleading and crying, reaching out for help. Terry Lynn admitted she knew from the outset what would happen and chose not to intervene, claiming she didn't want to be present for the final moments. This confession not only provided the police with the answers they needed, but also shocked the community, bringing an end to the weeks-long search for Tori Stafford. Back in the car, Michael Rafferty unleashed unimaginable cruelty on Tori Stafford. Afterward, Terry Lynn placed a bag over Tori's head and struck her with a hammer, ending her life. Together they buried her body at the remote location. On the drive back to town, Michael made Terry Lynn numerous promises, that they would always be together and that the police would never catch them. Following Terry Lynn's harrowing confession, investigators immediately headed to Michael's residence to place him under arrest. During the journey, they discovered a security camera and obtained permission to review its footage. The video was a crucial piece of evidence, capturing the pair on their way to commit the crime. In subsequent interrogations, police managed to extract information about the location where Tori's body had been hidden. A search led them to a wooded area where they found her remains wrapped in garbage bags and secured with tape. On July 20th, the preliminary autopsy report was released, revealing that Tori had suffered multiple hammer-inflicted injuries, with at least 4 blows penetrating her skull, resulting in fatal trauma. She also had 16 fractured ribs and liver damage. However, due to the body's advanced state of decomposition, it was impossible to determine if she had been assaulted in other ways. On July 21, 2009, authorities confirmed publicly that the remains found were indeed those of Tori Stafford. This heartbreaking announcement devastated her family and the community, who had come together in hope throughout the search. A funeral was held for Tori on July 30, 2009, attended by family, friends, and community members who gathered to honor her short but impactful life. The ceremony included heartfelt memories shared by loved ones, and the emotional impact of her case resonated deeply within society. Once the police investigation concluded and all evidence was gathered, the legal proceedings against the 2 accused commenced. Initially, prosecutors considered a joint trial, but eventually decided on separate trials after Terry Lynn pled guilty to first-degree murder. She faced an expedited trial and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. In contrast, Michael Rafferty maintained his innocence, refusing to testify and claiming no responsibility. As a result, his trial took place 3 years after Tori's disappearance, involving 62 witnesses and more than 200 pieces of evidence. Michael, now 31, did not testify. Although he admitted to some involvement in Tori's abduction, he denied the charges of murder, kidnapping, and sexual assault. The jury, however, found him guilty on all counts. Following the guilty verdict, Michael Rafferty received a life sentence for the murder of Victoria Stafford, also known as Tori Stafford, with parole eligibility only after 25 years. Additionally, he was given 10 years for kidnapping and sexual assault, to be served concurrently with his life sentence. Even if he were to be released, the judge permanently prohibited him from owning firearms. He was also required to submit a DNA sample to Canada's National Sex Offender Registry. After his sentencing, Michael continued to protest his innocence and even offered to meet with Tori's mother, Tara, ostensibly to fill in the missing pieces. Tara, however, refused any communication with him, stating she could never forgive him. Despite his repeated legal appeals over the years, all attempts to overturn his conviction have been denied. Tori Stafford's tragic story has left an indelible mark on Canadian society, underscoring the importance of child safety, parental responsibility, and the necessity for prompt police response in critical situations. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. On the night of September 29, 2015, a shocking 911 call broke the silence in a small town in upstate New York. Thomas Clayton, a former hockey player, came home from a poker game to find his wife, Kelly, lying on the kitchen floor, lifeless. The scene was disturbing. There was no sign of forced entry, but Kelly had clearly been attacked. Bloodstains on the walls showed signs of a terrible struggle. As detectives started looking into what happened, they uncovered secrets that hinted at something much darker. What really took place that night? And who was responsible for Kelly's tragic death? The truth would soon reveal a shocking twist no one expected. Kelly Elizabeth Stage was born on August 1, 1980, in Elmira, New York. She was the youngest of 3 children of Elizabeth and Howard Stage, both of whom were beloved in the community, especially Howard, who had served as the longtime chief of the local volunteer fire department. Growing up, Kelly was surrounded by her loving family, which included her brother Lenny and her older sister Kim, who, being 10 years her senior, took on a protective role in Kelly's life. The Stage household was filled with warmth and affection, allowing each family member to thrive in their own way. Kelly attended a liberal arts-focused school where she excelled, not only making the honor roll, but also standing out as a cheerleader and softball player. Those who knew her described her as someone who easily saw the good in people and situations, always radiating positivity and a zest for life. Her optimistic and outgoing nature made her naturally attract others. In 1998, Kelly graduated with a degree in education from the State University of New York, and though many assumed she would begin teaching immediately, she surprised everyone by taking a different path. She packed her bags and moved to Las Vegas, where she started working as a cocktail waitress. However, the pull of home was strong, and by 2000, she returned to Elmira to spend Christmas with her family. During this trip, she met Thomas Clayton, a man she would soon fall in love with. Thomas, a native of Binghamton, had graduated in 1998 and joined Elmira's minor league professional hockey team, where he played forward for 4 seasons. He quickly became a local star, enjoying the attention and admiration that came with his status. Some claimed that fame gave him a sense of entitlement, and he was known to engage in multiple romantic affairs simultaneously. His reckless behavior even led to an arrest after dancing naked on a bar table. Despite his wild side, Thomas and Kelly's paths crossed at a hockey game, and they were instantly drawn to each other. That same night, they ran into each other at a local bar, and their relationship blossomed from there. The couple was inseparable, and within a year they married, with Kelly taking her husband's surname and becoming known as Kelly Clayton. Around this time, Thomas's hockey career came to an abrupt end due to an injury. After retiring from the sport, the couple settled in the small town of Caton, New York, where Thomas became the owner of a franchise that specialized in water and fire damage restoration. In 2008, their first child, a daughter named Charlie, was born, and Kelly embraced motherhood with an overwhelming sense of love and devotion. A few years later, the birth of their son Cullen brought even more joy into Kelly's life, as she devoted herself entirely to her family. To those on the outside, the Claytons seemed like the perfect, happy family. Thomas focused on running his business, while Kelly balanced waitressing at a local restaurant and caring for their 2 children. Everything seemed idyllic until tragedy struck in 2015. On the night of September 29, 2015, Kelly was at home with her children while Thomas was out playing poker at a friend's house. Just after midnight, Thomas made a frantic call to 911, reporting that he had found his wife lying unresponsive on the floor. When the local sheriff's office and New York State Police arrived at the scene, a paramedic confirmed Kelly had died. Initial forensic evidence revealed she had been brutally beaten to death. Investigators found no signs of forced entry, leading them to believe that Kelly's killer may have been someone she knew. A trail of blood led from the upstairs to the kitchen, where Kelly's body was discovered, indicating that she had tried to flee during the attack. A hole in the wall at the bottom of the staircase was evidence of the sheer violence of the assault, and blood spatter on the walls and floors pointed to her having been struck repeatedly with a blunt object. While questioning Thomas and neighbors in the hours following the murder, a critical piece of evidence came from an unexpected source: Kelly's daughter, Charlie. The 7-year-old told the county sheriff that she had seen a man hurting her mother. During her conversation with the officer, Charlie revealed a chilling detail. She described how her mother had run down the hallway, yelling for her to escape. But the most haunting part of her account came when she mentioned that although the attacker had been wearing a hood, his eyes looked just like her father's. At that moment, authorities called in a child forensic investigator to assist with talking to Charlie about the traumatic event. A second interview with her took place at the county's Child Advocacy Center, where every question revolved around Thomas. According to Charlie, the mask worn by the assailant resembled one her father used when he went hunting. When asked to describe the man's size, Kelly's daughter, Charlie, said he was as tall as her father. She also pointed out a similarity in the jeans the man was wearing. Although suspicion toward Thomas grew due to the child's statements, he was at a friend's house that night, about 20 miles from his home, a drive of roughly 30 minutes. Furthermore, when he discovered Kelly's body and rushed to a neighbor's house to call 911, there was no blood on his hands or clothes, and he hadn't had enough time to clean himself up. The police were left with several unanswered questions. Thomas's alibi was corroborated by others who were with him that night. However, investigators learned that Thomas had borrowed a woman's cell phone to make a call only 90 minutes before returning home and finding Kelly's body. This raised more doubts. As the hours passed, the preliminary autopsy report on Kelly's body was released. It revealed that she had died from severe head trauma and damage to the lower part of her brain. In addition, her body was covered in bruises. She had abrasions, fractures to her face, and a serious contusion on her right hip. According to the forensic expert, the blows were so brutal that Kelly's body was almost unrecognizable, making it difficult to estimate her age and appearance. She also had defensive wounds on her arms and hands, including broken fingers, which indicated she had fought for her life. With the growing suspicion surrounding Thomas, investigators analyzed his cell phone records and noticed a high volume of messages and calls that pointed to a mysterious connection with a man named Michael Beard. In fact, Beard was the person Thomas had called the night of the murder. Michael Beard was a worker living in Elmira, in an apartment owned by the Clayton family. He had previously worked for Thomas's business and was often invited to do jobs around the family property. At the time of the crime, however, Beard had recently been fired from a similar company that also specialized in home restoration after fires and floods. State police investigators questioned Michael Beard multiple times over the next few days. Initially, he denied any involvement, but on October 2, 2015, after getting caught in several contradictions, he eventually broke down and confessed. In an unrecorded interview, Beard admitted that he had killed Kelly. He revealed chilling details, stating that Thomas had paid him $10,000 to carry out the murder. Beard then led the investigators to the place where he had hidden the murder weapon, a hammer handle stained with blood, which was found not far from the Clayton home. Beard also handed over the blood-stained clothes he wore that night and directed the authorities to a creek where he had tossed the keys to the family's home, given to him by Thomas. Forensic analysis of the blunt object used in the attack confirmed that the DNA matched Kelly's blood. Investigators determined that Beard had worn gloves during the murder, and though he had tried to dispose of them to eliminate DNA evidence, he failed to do so because the gloves belonged to Thomas. As more evidence pointed to Thomas, other discoveries raised further suspicions about him. Notably, a year before the incident, Thomas had doubled Kelly's life insurance policy from $500,000 to $1 million. During a media interview, Kelly's sister didn't hesitate to assert that Thomas stood to benefit from her death. The case became clear and justice began to move forward. With Charlie's testimony, the evidence collected, and Michael Beard's confession, prosecutors concluded that Kelly's death was a murder for hire. Both men were charged with first- and second-degree murder, and it was announced that their trials would be held separately. However, a third arrest shocked everyone. Mark Blandford, another suspect, was charged with second-degree murder, robbery, and conspiracy. According to the investigation, Michael Beard had been recruited to act as a lookout and help commit a robbery at the Clayton home. He claimed he never had direct contact with Thomas and wasn't aware of any conspiracy to commit murder. His understanding was that he would be participating in a burglary. As the days passed, tensions rose during Thomas Clayton's arraignment, revealing a clear divide between the two families who had once been on good terms. Thomas's supporters sat on one side of the courtroom, while Kelly's relatives and friends occupied the other. At the hearing, Thomas pleaded not guilty. His lawyer argued that Thomas had no involvement in the crime, pointing out that his alibi was solid. GPS data from his car confirmed that he was miles away, playing poker when Kelly was killed. The defense also noted that Thomas had passed a polygraph test. However, the prosecution countered by stating that the GPS evidence was irrelevant since the charges were based on a murder-for-hire plot. They also opposed the use of the polygraph test in the trial, arguing that it should not be admitted as evidence. Kelly's murder garnered significant media attention, stirring feelings of outrage and sadness within the community. Purple ribbons lined the streets, and posters demanding justice for Kelly were displayed throughout the town. For Kelly's family, the tragedy was immeasurable. Her two young children were now left without a mother, and their father was in prison. The emotional toll was immense, but so was the financial strain, as Kelly's sister, who was granted custody of the kids, suddenly faced the challenge of raising and supporting two young children. Friends and relatives rallied for support to help the children through this difficult time. In February 2016, Thomas was released from prison after posting an $850,000 bail. While awaiting trial, the judge lifted the protective order that had barred him from his home, allowing him access since the crime scene had been cleared, and the children no longer lived there. Michael Beard was the first to go to trial, but in the days leading up to it, he shockingly recanted his confession, which had not been recorded. He claimed that Thomas had hired him to burn down the house, which was supposed to be empty, to collect insurance money. According to Beard, when he arrived, he found Kelly's body and heard the children upstairs, at which point he abandoned his mission and left. Michael's defense attorney argued that his client had been coerced by the police into signing a false confession and that they would present evidence in court to prove this. On October 25th, Beard pleaded not guilty before a jury of 8 men and 4 women. He even referred to Kelly as a friend, expressing sympathy for her family. The prosecution, however, remained confident that the testimony and evidence would show that Michael and Thomas had conspired together. Despite Beard's change of story, the prosecution presented the details of his signed confession, which was read aloud during the testimony of the New York State Police investigator who had been present when Beard initially explained the events. In the confession, Beard said that Thomas had asked him to do something that could land him in prison, and though he didn't initially specify what, the tone of Thomas's request had shocked the investigator. Beard had first refused, but ultimately agreed after Thomas threatened him. Desperate for money due to unemployment, Beard accepted the offer of $10,000, with Thomas promising to provide a vehicle, a weapon, and the keys to the house. The plan was to enter the house when the children were not home, kill Kelly, and then set the house on fire to cover up the crime, making it look like a candle had caused the blaze. On the night of September 28th, Beard entered the home, went upstairs, and found Kelly lying in bed. He struck her with a blunt object, and though Kelly fought back, stumbling through the upper floor of the house, she eventually fell down the stairs. Despite being injured, she made it to the kitchen, where Beard attacked her again, delivering the fatal blows to her head. According to another investigator, Thomas had been supposed to call Beard that night as a signal, but Beard was instructed not to answer the phone. Phone records revealed that Beard's phone was turned on and off 7 times that night, the last time being at 11:45 p.m. It remained off until 1:12 a.m. on September 29th. The trial included extensive forensic evidence, such as Michael's DNA found on the blunt object used to kill Kelly. Michael's attorney argued that his client's confession was coerced, claiming he had feared his wife would be implicated if he didn't take responsibility. The defense also pointed to the lack of direct evidence, such as fingerprints, and questioned the reliability of witnesses, suggesting they had been influenced or had misunderstood what had happened on the night of the crime. After a 2-week trial, Michael Beard was found guilty of 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree manslaughter. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The reaction from Kelly's family and friends was one of an immense relief and satisfaction. Kelly's sister publicly called Michael a coward who deserved the harshest sentence. Bringing Thomas, Kelly's husband, to justice proved more challenging. His trial began in January 2017. The case against him was complicated because all physical evidence pointed to Michael, and the district attorney couldn't use Michael's confession or call him as a witness due to Beard's retraction of his earlier statement. Instead, the prosecution relied on phone records and GPS data to build their case against Thomas, alongside a mountain of circumstantial evidence and testimony from women who claimed to have had affairs with him while he was married to Kelly. The testimonies of these women provided another potential motive for the crime. Prosecutors argued that Thomas, a businessman and former hockey player, no longer loved his wife, which was evidenced by his numerous affairs. 3 women testified that Thomas often complained about Kelly, using derogatory terms to describe her, and told them he planned to leave her because she was lazy and ungrateful. However, he also admitted to one of his lovers that he couldn't divorce Kelly because she would take everything. One of the most shocking testimonies came from a minor who was 15 years old when she had been involved with Thomas. Another key witness was a former police officer who owned a private investigation firm. He was able to cross-reference phone records and determine that Thomas and Michael had been together at various points leading up to the crime. It was also shown that Michael left his home shortly before 11 p.m. on the night of the murder, right after receiving a call from the man who had hired him. The prosecutor concluded that Thomas had masterminded the plan to end his marriage and had found the perfect scapegoat in his former employee, Michael. Thomas's defense centered on the argument that he was being falsely accused, claiming that Michael had acted alone with the sole intent of robbing the house. The prosecution called 65 witnesses and presented over 400 pieces of evidence, while the defense presented 10 witnesses and conducted rigorous cross-examinations. 7 weeks after the trial began, the jury deliberated for only 6 hours before delivering their verdict. On February 23, 2017, Thomas was found guilty of first and second-degree murder. After the verdict was read, Kelly's sister presented a letter that Charlie, Kelly's daughter, had written for the court. In it, Charlie expressed her love for both her mother and father, but called her dad a coward for making Michael kill her mom. Kelly's sister also stated that raising the children allowed her to keep her sister's memory alive and ensure that Kelly's legacy as a loving mother would never be forgotten. Thomas's family stood by him throughout the trial, and after the guilty verdict, his father expressed pride in calling him his son. The sentencing hearing took place nearly 2 months later. Thomas Clayton was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and was ordered to serve his time in a New York State correctional facility. As for the third man charged in connection with the crime, it was revealed that he had reached a plea deal with prosecutors. He pleaded guilty to second-degree manslaughter in exchange for testifying against Thomas and received a sentence of 3 to 6 years in prison. In October 2018, Thomas appealed his conviction, bringing the case back into the public eye. His lawyers argued that the evidence presented at the trial, particularly the cell phone data used to track movements, was unreliable and untested. They also maintained that the prosecution had failed to prove Thomas's guilt. Despite their efforts, the appeal was denied, leaving limited options for future legal challenges. On January 20, 2023, more than 6 years after the crime, a major television network aired a true crime documentary which reignited public interest in the case. Michael Beard participated in the program, supposedly to clarify his side of the story. In the interview, he continued to claim his innocence, asserting that both Thomas and the police had set him up and that he had nothing to do with Kelly's murder. Beard stated that when he found Kelly's body, he didn't check if she was alive or call 911 because he wanted to get out of the situation as quickly as possible. He explained that, as a black man, the mere thought of being found in the home of a dead white woman in the middle of the night terrified him. Beard also claimed that he had encountered someone else inside the house, but was unable to see their face, as the person knocked him down while fleeing. Thomas refused to be interviewed for the program, while Kelly's family shared that her children were doing well, growing up happy despite everything they had been through. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.